Welcome back to the Live Lounge on day 2 of Open Banking Expo UK and Europe. And I'm delighted to be joined by Carla Abrão, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Open Finance Brasil. Welcome to the Live Lounge, Anna.
Thank you very much, Ali. Thanks for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, we're really pleased to have you with us, and we want to hear all about your experience implementing open banking and open finance in Brazil. But to start with, can you tell us about your role and what Open Finance Brasil does, what your role is there?
Well, actually, I'm the CEO of Open Finance Brasil. Open Finance Brasil is an association that was created this year as the definite structure for operating and responsible for the governance of open finance in Brazil. We are a non-profit private association owned by the market participants. Currently, we have more than 800 participants in open finance, in the ecosystem, in the Open Finance Brasil Association, and they are the ones that fund the operation, the association, and the governance of the ecosystem. We joined March this year. We created not only the association from scratch, but also we have now the executive level totally in place and operating. We are now a full-fledged open finance structure that we hope it's the definite structure that will follow on the operation in Brazil for open finance.
Absolutely. Well, let's go back to the very beginning. How did Brazil approach implementing open banking initially, and were there any countries you looked to for sort of inspiration?
Well, actually, the inspiration was, of course, UK.
Yeah.
We started the discussions in Brazil in 2017, when the Central Bank of Brazil was, of course, very concerned with financial market concentration. We had more than 90% of the market concentrated in only 5 big banks in Brazil, and the Central Bank started discussion how to foster competition, to foster new entrants, and we looked at the UK that was implementing open banking here. We visited the UK. At that time, I was leading Oliver Wyman consulting firm in Brazil, and we were supporting the Central Bank in this discussion. We then came with the Central Bank, with the Banks Association to visit CMA and many market participants in the UK. And of course, that was the inspiration to start discussing domestically our open banking. It started as open banking, as you did, and then into 2022, after we implemented in 2020, just when we had the COVID-19 pandemic. But in 2 years, we decided to turn it into open finance, and here we are, 5 years down the road.
And open banking, open finance is sort of, or Brazil rather, is held up as being a real success story for open banking and open finance, isn't it? So can you paint us a picture of the number of API calls and just the sheer scale, I suppose, of open banking there?
Because we are very proud of what Brazil has done in this space. We started, as I said, with transactional, actually open data, public data. It was the first phase of open banking in Brazil. And then we moved to transaction data, banking data. But very rapidly, the phase 3 came with investments, insurance, FX, credit card data. So the scope of open finance in Brazil is very wide. It's interesting because when we compare Brazil with UK or Australia, that were the countries that at that time were implementing open banking, Brazil made a decision, the Central Bank of Brazil made a decision to widen the scope of data, the financial data that we had, but the perimeter was limited to regulated financial institutions. So on one side, we decided not to go to telco and smart data more widely.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the financial data, it's very wide. So we have all the credit operations, all the transactional information, all the investments inside Open Finance, insurance, FX, credit cards, but all of it under or within the regulatory scope to make sure that the central bank, that is the regulator responsible for open finance supervision in Brazil, to make sure that it's under its umbrella. And of course, that's why he can enforce all the standards, enforce the adoption, enforce everything that the Open Finance Association sets as priorities with the market. But at the end of the day, is the central bank the one that makes sure that the adoption is under all the standards that were defined.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fascinating to hear about the approach you've taken, the sheer scale of adoption there. But I can imagine there have been some challenges along the way. No country has been able to, I guess, implement open banking and open finance without coming across, some barriers, some challenges to overcome. So what are yours in Brazil?
Yes, of course. But let me share the numbers that you asked before.
Yes, of course.
As I said, we are very proud of what is done. We currently have, as I said, more than 800 participants. We have more than 70 million accounts connected. Mm-hmm. We have more than 100 million consents given. We have around 4 billion API calls per week, which means that we have 300 billion API calls per year. Mm-hmm. So it's huge.
Yeah.
With this wide scope of data, of course, this is a very intense and very big and challenging environment and infrastructure. But we monitor, as the Open Finance Association, we are responsible to monitor the performance of this API, the quality of the data, inform the central bank when there are non-conforming situations.
Right.
But it's really big. It's very complex because I don't know exactly how the UK works currently, but we are a peer-to-peer connection. When we think about 800 participants that have peer-to-peer APIs and connections, it's really complex to monitor, and we do it through the Open Finance Association. In terms of challenge, of course, when we look at this infrastructure, such a complex system, such a distributed network with such a wide scope of data, of course, the challenges come, first of all, with the monitoring. We are every time trying to put in a lot of effort to make sure that we are able to monitor the ecosystem in the correct way, especially because we inform the central bank and the central bank takes action on supervision based on the monitoring that we do. Mm-hmm. And the other big challenge that we have is to make sure that the adoption that is so successful with consumers currently also is successful with for companies, especially SMEs, which is a focus for us, the policy focus in Brazil to foster credit, to improve credit conditions. Mm-hmm. We still didn't get there. We have challenges with adoption. The journey for giving the consent for consumers is very simple in Brazil, but for companies, even for SMEs that are simpler, it's still a big challenge. So we are putting a lot of effort to make sure that we are able to give the SMEs the same incentives and the same simplicity and the same smooth journey that we have for consumers to get to a more successful results in terms of adoption also for SMEs.
Mm-hmm. It's fascinating to hear about that. And at the very start, you mentioned, obviously, in the early days in Brazil, you were looking to the UK, which pioneered sort of open banking. But now I think a few years down the line, we often talk about the UK having maybe lost that crown. And I'm interested in finding out which market, which jurisdiction you look to now as you look ahead to continuing to roll out open finance in Brazil.
Well, actually, I would say that we are looking, because there is one concept only that I think it's very important. We started as the open banking as a competition agenda. We needed to have a market that was more competitive. It was too much concentrated, and the competition agenda was the main motivation. But 5 years down the road, what we see is that it's more currently that we have such a big adoption. We see that it's much more a new way to relate with your client when we think about financial transactions, financial relationships. In Brazil, I think we crossed the line where not being open finance, it's a competitive disadvantage and not anymore. You need to be there because there is a regulatory burden and you need to adopt it. So when we look at the UAE, we look at the region and the way that they are building open finance there with a lot of interest, because we think that they have this concept of being efficient, a financial sector that is more smooth, journeys of payments and sharing of data that are very natural. The way that they are thinking open finance is more the way that also we see that the market in Brazil is adopting it. So that's where we are very interested to see how they move on with and they build their system to make sure that we also learn from their experience.
Yeah, and they're definitely moving at pace. So it's fascinating to see the UAE's journey, I think. Well, look, Anna, just one final question. I know you took part in our Regulator Day on Monday, our very first Regulator Day. You've obviously been here at the Expo for 2 days. How have you found it sharing best practice with other markets and the rest of the ecosystem?
Very, very valuable, Ali. It was an opportunity, of course, to share the Brazilian experience, but mostly it was very insightful for us to see how so many countries are involving. Even for LATAM experience, we had Peruvian regulators here that we had the chance to talk to them. You see, it's so far away from our region, but we had the opportunity also to share experience with them. But so many other jurisdictions, so many other countries, many regulators that were sharing their experience and their priorities. So for us, it was very, very important to be here.
Well, we're really pleased to have you here, and thank you so much for joining me and to tell me all about open finance in Brazil.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for the opportunity.